Welcome to Backstage at Upstage, a presentation of Upstage Lung Cancer, which uses the performing arts to raise awareness and funding for lung cancer research. Here's your host, the founder and president of Upstage Lung Cancer, Hildy Grossman.
Hi, I'm Hildy Grossman, and we're so excited to have you with us today backstage at Upstage. And here's my good pal, Jordan Rich.
Thank you, Hildy. On November 27, 2011, former 12-year veteran NFL star Chris Draft married the love of his life, Keasha Rutledge, in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by loved ones. An organization the couple founded called Team Draft was launched on Chris and Keasha's wedding day. Exactly 1 month later, at age 38, Keasha passed away. The cause? Lung cancer. Chris sat by her side as she took her last breaths. He was inspired and determined to create Team Draft with the goal of changing the face of lung cancer. And Chris is a longtime supporter of Upstage Lung Cancer. Again, his website, teamdraft.org. And now Hildy will kick things off.
So, Chris,
Yes.
I'd love you to say a little bit about your entree into the lung cancer community, and then we can talk some more about stigma as we go along.
Well, thank you for having me. I know this is a brand new show, and you guys are using this platform to really educate people so that during the year leading up to your fundraisers, that they have a chance to get to know more of why you do what you do. I think that's so important. Understanding the origin, understanding the reason why is so critical for people to really get why something matters. I didn't wake up one morning and want to be a lung cancer advocate. I am on this show because I'm a lung cancer advocate. It's not because I'm a former NFL football player. It's not because I live in Boston, I live in Atlanta. I mean, I am not some random person. I am a lung cancer advocate, but that did not just happen because I woke up and I said, oh my goodness, I want to be a lung cancer advocate. And for so many people, it's the same thing. It's the same story, really across the board, and then not just with lung cancer. Issue becomes your issue when you have a personal connection with that issue. And so for me, that personal connection is my wife, Keasha. In December of 2010, she was my girlfriend at the time. She had a little shortness of breath. And that little shortness of breath with someone else, they might have tried to ignore it. They might have said, you know what, I'm not going to go to the doc. But she was someone that was always on top of her checkup and was honest about her body, because she was in amazing shape, great shape, 37 years old, was challenging me to do P90X and run a 10K race. So that type of shape. So she went in and had just a little shortness of breath. And her primary care doc said, well, give you some antibiotics, but let's just go get a chest x-ray. Went over and got a chest x-ray, mass in her left lung, right? And so there's a possibility of lung cancer, because until we get the biopsy, we don't know for sure. And you're hoping that maybe there's a possibility that it's not. And so that was right before Christmas of 2010. We confirmed 2 days after Christmas that she had lung cancer. And at that point, really knowing that that's early stage and hopefully it hasn't spread, which would then be bad. 10 years ago, at about this time, 10 years ago, after having her PET scan and having an MRI, that we found out that she had stage 4 cancer that had spread to her brain. A 37-year-old woman in amazing shape is diagnosed with lung cancer. And you have to believe at that moment something that you would have never thought of unless somebody would have told you directly, and unless they had, say, some physical evidence, you probably wouldn't have believed them. And that is that anyone can get lung cancer. Now, for me to say that that's easy, because my wife, again, Keasha, was 37 years old when she was diagnosed, and I was with her. I can see that. I know it. If you don't have somebody in your life like that, that the history would tell you that that's not true.
If I may jump in for a second, it's nice to meet you, Chris, and
How you doing, Jordan?
my friend Hildy and I, we've done a lot. We've been in cahoots for a long time, raising money, and I love her. I share a similar story. They're all different, but similar. I just wanted to get this to you that my first wife, my late wife of 31 years, also a non-smoker, never had any issues, but she did have other issues with cancer that were dealt with in the late 80s, early 90s with very heavy radiation treatment, which led then to mesothelioma, a deadly form of lung cancer. So even though the circumstances are different, there's that sense of, well, what did we do to trigger this? And no one knows the exact answer, but it's really a problem that affects people from all walks of life, as you say, and that's so important to make that message clear.
Yeah, it's so important to understand that anyone can get it. But what I'll tell you is it's important to not just completely focus on the cause so much that you don't focus on the person that hasn't. And so I can
Right.
tell you is that my wife was in amazing shape, and we could have easily, and she could have easily been worried about how did I get it? How did I get it? That is not a winning battle, right?
Mm.
And so my wife chose to move forward and focus on what she could control. There's people that will study that one. But in terms of somebody that has it, is to be able to stay focused on each day and make sure that you stay in the moment. And what she did a great job of putting together an amazing plan with all the tremendous resources that we had around us. I mean, she knew medical people like crazy, and they really rallied around us during that time. Her family rallied around us. And then she just had an amazing spirit about her where instead of thinking about the loss that was cancer, the loss of things, she found a way to find joy in each day and kind of push that, not that it's easy. I mean, it's extremely difficult of what she did was to be able to mentally allow herself to see the positive in these days when she's 37 years old and literally everything about her experience at stage 4 lung cancer, not being able to be on some of the newer targeted therapies at that particular time and just going to chemo, and that so many things meant that dreams that she had were just getting taken away. But her faith was so strong and her mind was so strong that it allowed her to continue to find joy, all the way up until she passed in December 27th of 2011.
I was going to say, my own experience with lung cancer that was found by accident. I eat well, I don't smoke, which is the first question anybody asks you. Do you smoke? I'm active, I move around. And so it's the same thing. When it happened, when I received the diagnosis, it was kind of mind-boggling at that time. I didn't know anyone who'd had lung cancer. For me personally, it felt embarrassing. I had this image in my own mind of who gets lung cancer. It's certainly not Keasha, not some beautiful dancer, some, amazing, creature on this earth. It's like my mind, it was this sort of, this sounds terrible, but this is how I thought about it. Some guy in some bar with a light, one light bulb swinging back and forth, a 3-day growth of beard, like 6 beers in front of him, and a giant pot belly. That's the face of lung cancer at the time.
So if I can interject something, because I know we're going to talk about stigma, it's important for you to not make the image that you're kind of depicting, that you're kind of describing, that image is not something that you came up with. That's an image that was taught to you. That's an image that you were shown, right? That is what's so important. When I'm saying that anyone can get it, I'm saying that nobody would know that anyone can get it, right? That I had to find out because I wasn't taught that, right?
Right.
So
We both
is an example that anyone can get it. Now, I'm not trying to debate that. All I'm saying is that that's what it is. That's the truth. But if we don't tell people, then how would they know?
They wouldn't know. And I always said, look at me. If I can get lung cancer, you can get lung cancer, which, usually makes people, sort of stop in their tracks. But it's true. That's just the way it is. But I agree with you. There are images, there are prejudices, stigma associated with lung cancer. And I think you're absolutely right about you have to be taught.
Yeah, so the key is just to recognize that. This is about how we were taught, right? And then once you get that, then it allows you to be able to work back through it. And so my wife was diagnosed, but I played in the NFL for 12 years. That was my 13th year. I was with the Redskins right before in training camp before Keasha was diagnosed. So I built a relationship with the NFL. We're talking about the #1 platform in America in terms of media. This is a platform. If you wanted to change the face of lung cancer, then you would want to be able to use that. And so before my wife passed, we were able to get married November 27, 2011, and we launched our Team Draft Initiative, which is committed to changing the face of lung cancer. And part of that, again, is really using, anytime that you take a stand, you use the resources and connections that you have time, talent, and treasure really kind of guide those ways. And so I'd already been in contact with the commissioner of the NFL. I actually spoke with him 10 years ago, January of 2011, and he said, "What can we do? What can we do?" That is so critically important that the lung cancer community. I've told this story a number of times, and the problem is as I tell it, people are thinking that the NFL should do all of the work. That if they said that they were supportive, then why didn't they change lung cancer? Because they can't by themselves. Because we need the experts to actually validate that lung cancer is bigger than just getting people to stop smoking. That it's bigger than just the Great American Smokeout. So, unfortunate thing is that before Keasha was ready to stand, before team draft was established, I went over based on the commissioner introducing me. He set up the meeting at American Cancer Society. And I said to them, "You guys, the meeting, my wife is diagnosed with lung cancer, and you know that the commissioner is on board because he set up the meeting. The NFL is on board because they were a part of this. All my teams are on board because of that, right? So when my wife is ready, what we want to do is work with you guys to raise money for lung cancer research." Well, the response was, "All we have is the Great American Smokeout." So when somebody asks me, why is it that people only know about the connection with smoking? And I'm saying, well, the answer is very easy. If that's all you've been told, then that's all you'll know. And if the experts aren't willing to change, of course, even more so, that's all you will know.
Well, I think that's also because they thought they would have the biggest bang for their buck. If they could get people to quit smoking, then the problem's solved. Nobody's going to get lung cancer. Well, we know better, right?
Well, and that's where I was saying, Hildy, is that the key is the cancer or disease game plan is the same across the board. Prevention, early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship. If you can get a large amount of people based on prevention, smoking cessation, that's great. But if you can't get 100%, then you need to activate the other areas, right? It's very simple. The game plan is not anything specific to lung cancer. It can be applied to any other disease and pretty much any other problem. What we had to get is the lung cancer community to acknowledge that and recognize that that's where our fight is. So when someone says there's a stigma in lung cancer, literally what they're doing is just acknowledging the historic prevention campaign.
We'll get back to the podcast in just a moment. Upstage Lung Cancer exclusively uses music and the performing arts to get the word out about lung cancer. Through concerts and activities, Upstage helps fund much needed research. As the saying goes, find it, treat it, beat it. Please subscribe to this podcast series and tell your friends. Oh, and if you'd like to join our efforts, consider a donation of any amount at upstagelungcancer.org. And now, back to the podcast.
When I went in for surgery, they hand you a form and you fill in, name, address, and serial number. So one of the questions was, do you smoke? And I had this wave that shocked through me. And I thought, thank God I don't smoke, because I would feel so much shame and humiliation. That shouldn't be, because again, we also know, even for people who do smoke, they're not, they should not be the target.
Well, so the problem is if you actually think of it as a target, and I think that's the real issue. As victims in this lung cancer community, we're taking something that's an obvious question that they ask on any intake for any cancer or any disease, any doctor's visit. They do that all the time, right? Because with lung cancer, they're taking it to heart in a different way. And so the reality is that in this country, the cigarette industry got indicted for predatory marketing and making their cigarettes more addicting. And so in doing that, they literally, based on an indictment, said that people that smoked were victims of the industry, right? It's only our problem in our community. So our community has to acknowledge them as victims and be willing to fight for them. Right? It's our community that has to acknowledge that to be a former smoker, that there are studies that show that quitting smoking is as hard as quitting heroin, right?
Well, actually harder.
Yeah. Well,
I'll tell you why. If you go to methadone clinics, you can get people off heroin, but you can't get them necessarily to quit smoking. It's that addicting.
So if we look at that in that aspect, I'm saying that literally the companies got indicted. They created victims based on it. The people that have been able to stop smoking, former smokers, You're literally talking about them accomplishing something, one of their greatest accomplishments of their life. If we don't celebrate that as a community, it's our fault. It is our community that enforces a stigma, if there is one. We have to validate that our people matter. We have to accept that someone is a current smoker, that is a victim of a system. We have to love the person that was able to fight and become a former smoker. We have to acknowledge that there are never smokers will get this disease. And then we have to stand up and fight and make it clear that prevention is not enough, and not wait for somebody outside the community to do it, but make it clear that whatever works for everyone else is the same thing for lung cancer. Prevention, early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship. Anything else is unacceptable.
I have a question that I'd love both of you to tackle, and it's the elephant in the corner of the room. And of course, I'm talking about COVID-19 and all the impact that that's had, which is legitimate. It's a terrible, terrible scourge. So many people aren't even going for their regular checkups or for scans. And we know that the attention paid to things like lung cancer, which is a serious, serious killer in America and across the world, has faded. What's your stance on where we are and what we need to do in lieu of what we're dealing with COVID? We'll start with you, Chris.
So, Jordan, I think it's a great question for you to ask. I would say that cancer across the board, the diagnoses are down. I mean, they're dramatically down. We have studies that say that, and that's not just lung cancer. That's because in terms of understanding how to make it safe for people to go to the doctor, that's been a difficult process. So to say that that's a lung cancer issue by itself is wrong. It's tied to then dealing with COVID and making sure that the hospital system gets back to normal, making sure that we understand the rules that allow people to have confidence to go back in. So it's not just that you have something going on, but do you have the confidence to go to the doctor? Are you able to go to the doctor? Do they want you to go to the doctor? Which again, that's bigger than lung cancer in terms of that. But here's what I'll say in terms of COVID from a positive in terms of impacting the lung cancer community moving forward, is that if you have a respiratory disease where it's impacting people's lungs, then which cancer will have the biggest direct connection to COVID? And so as we're in the middle of it right now, we're not talking about survivorship as much, but the real issue kind of moving forward, and it's just a very easy, natural question, is that how has it changed getting COVID where you had to get hospitalized? How does that change your risk factor for lung cancer? So when we say anyone can get it, I mean, that looks totally different when we've had this COVID virus really affect our country. And so potentially that completely, that changes the numbers and changes the people. But that's something that we have to study. That's something that naturally begs research because of the amount of people affected by the coronavirus.
Right. And I think it's going to be very likely that the numbers do go up, especially for people who have had COVID, and even people who have had COVID without major symptoms. It's very possible that sometime later down the road, it's going to impact their lungs and potentially lung cancer. Also, the hospitals have been overwhelmed. So part of the message is, don't come bothering us. That's not that nasty, but it's like, please don't come and flood our hospitals unless you've got something seriously wrong. Well, for somebody like Keasha, somebody who says, well, I'm just short of breath, but there's nothing major in terms of an obvious symptom, they're waiting, they're standing back. And then those are really dangerous circumstances. So yeah.
But really, that's across the board, that anybody in that situation, bigger than lung cancer, those are issues that everyone's dealing with until we get control of coronavirus, where we make it easier for people to get it. Now I'm going to tell you, she was absolutely, on it. So she probably would have, and then also had the relationships with primary care doctor. If there was somebody that could still get diagnosed at that particular time because of the people that she had that were supportive of her, that not everybody has. Right. She's friends with her primary care docs, friends with so many medical people, that her path with lung cancer, her journey with lung cancer, was different.
It's interesting. My wife, same idea. She fought very bravely and didn't allow it to change the person she was. She was a teacher and a mom and a wife, and she retained her life. And I think that's also that stigma thing we talked about. Can you also focus on what your organization has been doing in the last couple of years? Because we want people to go to the website, obviously, and find out and support. But what have been some of your initiatives?
Well, so basically 10 years, what's our main initiative, come back to is changing the face of lung cancer. Basically what I said earlier is that we're redefining what does it mean to be able to tackle lung cancer. So when somebody, again, talks about a stigma, the stigma just really acknowledges that there's been a prevention campaign historically. And so acknowledging that that's incomplete is not enough, because we have to educate people on the rest, right? So acknowledging that they don't know, wow, that's good, but are we going to educate them about the things that they need to know? And so that's been our commitment of really saying that it can happen to anyone, but recognizing that, I can show pictures of my wife, but that's one person, right? The people need to see people. They need to feel it. They need to know it, that it can happen in their community. They can happen all over. I mean, that's what breast cancer does. They say it can happen to the women in your life. It can happen, it can happen, it can happen. And so lung cancer needed to grab a hold of that same message of it can happen, it can happen, it can happen, and research matters, research matters, along with early detection and treatment. And then we need to max these things out because our people deserve for us to fight at a level that is all in. And so that's what our mission of changing the face of lung cancer is acknowledging that anyone can get it, knowing that prevention is not enough, accepting that it takes early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship. And if we don't say it, if we don't stand up and say it, then nobody else is going to do it, right? So don't blame other people. Don't be, get mad at somebody because they don't know. If we didn't tell them, and don't get mad because they're not willing to stand up, if we didn't help them understand why it matters.
I was going to just add that I think Chris and I, our organization's missions are very, very similar, if not identical. Upstage Lung Cancer took the tack of using music in the performing arts because it's so celebrated and people find joy and they find respect and they find admiration in performers. And so I always say it's a little bit like Mary Poppins. If you want the general public to listen to what's going on in lung cancer, you have to make it appealing. And so it's like Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So if we can have music, if we can have entertainment, if we can have laughter, if we can have joy, and then include messages that are so important, which is if you are short of breath, don't wait. Don't feel like it's foolish on your part to check things out. And I think that's part of what stigma does. It's embarrassing to go. People don't want to know. People worry about what their relatives will say or what their neighbors will say. Mm-hmm. I think we come from this very positive direction to pay attention to lung cancer and to keep talking about it and the need for research. So
the stigma is really just the acknowledgement of a problem. But the real deal is, are you going to do something about the problem? That's the only way that something really changes. So to say that people are treated poorly or they're treated differently, wow, we said it, but what are we doing about it? And that's our job as lung cancer advocates, to make sure that we validate with everything that we do that our people matter. And there might, recognizing that, again, a 50-year campaign made it where there might not, it might take a little while for the community to really kind of get on board with that message. But literally, the historic message was to get people to stop smoking. That was what we asked people to do. So to support lung cancer, we asked them to do that. And so the people did that. So to think that they won't be supportive of other messages when they actually were already supportive, it's just a different message.
I think there's a lot more enthusiasm. I know for myself over these 13 years, there's more enthusiasm to hear about the need for early detection. That we've got CT scans that are available, and they're available in a high-risk community now. You can go ahead and do that, and Medicare will pay for it. In these 13 years, there have been so many new treatments that have come out. There's now more hope and more of a positive vision. I know when I started, I didn't have one good thing I could say. I'd say, well, it's not good, but we're going to support research. What research? I don't know. Now I do know. I know exactly. And we have supported some amazing early detection research. We will not stop until it's available for everyone. Yes, you and I are very tenacious. We are not to be stopped. I could play for the NFL if I were a little larger, maybe.
Question is, can our guests sing? Because we can get them on stage to do that.
I am an extreme backup singer, so that my skill set as much as being an MC for people that really are performers, and
I'm with you on that. That's what I do.
Giving them perspective in terms of why things matter. Just to add to this is that it's about building a team, all right? And so much of why I use the backdrop of the NFL is it's the number one sport in America. So if we want to get our message out, that creates the platform to get it out. But we have to be confident in our message. The first year I went to 60 cancer centers, and I went around and talked to each one of these doctors in the centers. And I said, well, I have a platform. I have the biggest platform, right? You guys saw they did our story before the Super Bowl in 2012. You guys can see that. I said, but I cannot say that research matters without you as experts standing up and saying it too. And that's a big part of why we are where we are in this community is, again, we're waiting for somebody else to tell us to do something that is obvious. We're waiting for somebody to tell us to do something that everyone else has already done. And that is, if research matters, we stand up and ask for it. Too often somebody says that the stigma is the reason why lung cancer screening is low. No, lung cancer screening is low because we haven't made sure the people that are eligible know about it and make sure they feel like it's worth it.
Both of those are essential, that people know that it's there and they know they can access it, and it will save it's already saved so many lives to make the lung cancer screening more available. But at the same time, there still remains stigma. We can't pretend like it doesn't exist. It's still there. And so the more we talk, the more we change the face. I don't have the face of my previous image of a lung cancer a victim. So I think that's what's going to happen. It's about educating.
So what I'm saying, Hildy, is acknowledging that there is a stigma, but how you overcome that is by being very intentional about it. So without acknowledging, just saying it rather than going to work on it. And the problem is we have too many people that stop by just saying it rather than actually going. And we have clear evidence that when people go after the people, when they go and sell to the people, when they go educate the people, that they're all on board. I'd say that Roger Goodell, as soon as Keasha was diagnosed, he said, what could we do? There was no stigma that was in the way of him saying, what can we do? That wasn't what got in the way. It was the American Cancer Society not wanting to stand up and say that research matters. It was other cancer centers that wouldn't want to stand up and say that research matters. They did not want to stand up and say that research matters. So our priorities have to come through. And if they don't, then it's our fault.
It's a team effort. And it also reminds me, it's like a company for a theater, and it's like a chorus. We have to expand our chorus. We have to have our voices heard. We have to make sure people know research matters, lives matters. Lung cancer continues to be the number 1 cancer killer. We need to address cancer in general. So I think what we're talking about, impacts anyone with cancer in the family. So it's about being strong, being bold, sing or say what's necessary.
Yes, we have to re-teach everyone.
Then to change stigma to schmigma, which was my theme for this, it's like stigma, schmigma, like who cares? We can say who cares once we have been specific, once people do know what needs to happen, once they have been educated, and once they stand up and do the work, not just wring their hands. So
I got you. Or I would say that the stigma comes from just a prevention campaign. And so the way we deal with that is when we decide that our people matter enough to make sure that we let the people know. We let the medical community know that prevention is not enough, that early detection, treatment, research, and survivorship are necessary, and that we are going to fight with everything we have to make sure that that happens, because our people deserve it.
Bravo. Well, I want to thank Chris Draft, my friend, my co-advocate, a partner in so many things that we've worked on together and will continue to work on together. I'm grateful. Your voice, your efforts, your intelligence, and your vision are so important to lung cancer. And so I'm grateful to have you on our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
To find out how you can join Upstage Lung Cancer in raising awareness and funding to beat lung cancer, visit our website, upstagelungcancer.org. We invite you to subscribe and download our podcast, available on all platforms. And we love reviews and ratings. After all, we're showbiz people. There's more entertainment and inspiration to come on the next podcast episode of Backstage at Upstage.